What's growing on, gardeners? It's Saturday, May 25th, and things are starting to heat up here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina. On today's video, I'm going to show you 4 ways that you can speed up the growth of your garden so you will have harvests earlier than you ever thought possible. Let's get on with it. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the bell to receive new video notifications, and check out our Amazon store and Spreadshop links in the video description for everything I use in my garden and awesome custom designed apparel and other gear. Your support is greatly appreciated. It's late May, the warm weather has kicked in, you are well past your last frost date, and you have finally planted all of your warm season vegetables out into your garden, and you are ready to kick off and start harvesting some of that food. But there's a problem. Yes, your plants are planted, but everything is still tiny, and while things are warming up during the day, the temperatures are inconsistent and it cools off a lot at night. So you have to wait at this point for the plants to not only grow and put on size, but flower, set fruit, make those fruits larger, and actually mature and ripen those fruits. So at the rate things are going, it is going to be months before you actually harvest anything off of these little tiny plants. But what if I told you that there are things that you can do, manipulations you can make to the plants and to the climate around the plants so they will speed up their growth process? It's true, there are tiny alterations that you can make that over the course of time add up to be huge difference makers and will have you picking fruits and vegetables in your garden sooner than ever before. Plants are a lot like cold-blooded animals in the sense that their metabolic rate is tied to temperatures, and generally speaking, the warmer the average temperature, the faster the metabolic rate of that plant, and therefore the faster it will grow. Yes, it is true that there will eventually be a certain threshold where temperatures get so high that it has so much heat stress on the plant that it could stall or even harm the plant, but hey, if you're watching this video, chances are it's because it's too cool in your climate and things are growing too slowly. You probably haven't gotten to a point where heat stress is an issue yet. So what ways can we actually change the microclimate surrounding our plants to get them to grow more quickly? Tip number 1 is to warm up the microclimate surrounding your plants by using black plastic, or in this case, weed barrier fabric. Now, when I was a child, I worked on a corn and tomato farm in New Jersey, and the problem that we had was we had frost until early May, so we couldn't plant out the determinate tomato plants until early May, but people would start coming down to the Jersey Shore starting in late June, early July, and they would be banging our doors down for tomatoes. Well, it's just not possible on their own, under just the power of the sun, for little tomato plants planted in early May to have a harvest of big red beefsteak tomatoes by the July 4th holiday. So what the farmer did was, before he planted all of the tomatoes, he would put down this black plastic in big rows, and then he would punch holes in the black plastic and he would place the individual tomatoes. And all of that additional heat that the black plastic would attract throughout the day, well, it added another 5 degrees or so, and over the course of months, all of that accumulated additional heat gradually, well, and then eventually rapidly, really sped up the growth rate, the metabolism of those plants, because they were constantly in an artificially warmed microclimate. And because the black plastic was on the ground, it was also heating up the soil longer during the day, which would radiate the heat back more during night. So all of the time, the average temperature surrounding all of those tomato plants would be higher, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And this led to harvests weeks in advance had he not put down the black plastic. Last year, I ran this experiment in my raised garden beds, and hey, it worked great. I took this black fabric weed barrier and I rolled it out in rows, and then I cut little squares every place I wanted to place a tomato plant. And just like I thought it would, it sped up the growth rate of the tomato plants, and I had ripe fruit sooner. And the best part is, using this fabric weed barrier, I didn't just get the advantage of the additional growth rate of the tomato plants. I didn't get any weeds in that area because the weed barrier fabric did exactly what it said it would do. It stopped the germination of any weeds. So not only did I get enhanced growth rates and faster harvests, but I had way less weeding to do throughout the year. Now, if you're interested in this black weed barrier product, I will link to it down in the video description for your convenience. I use it all over my yard and garden, and I want to show you how it can speed up your container garden growth as well. 6 or 7 growing seasons ago, it's been so long I can barely remember, my yard was just a clear-cut sandy lot. So I wanted to preserve that sandy lot, and I ran this weed barrier all throughout the area. And I did it with the understanding that I was going to have a bunch of fruit trees and vegetables in this area in containers growing, and I thought it would speed up the process. Well, I ran the experiment, and what I found was when the sun was out, this whole area would heat up to be 3 to 5 degrees warmer at all times. And because of that, my container garden always grows way faster than my in-ground fruit trees and my in-ground vegetables. And you can see the results of this accelerated growth in action. This Super Sweet 100 tomato plant is already 6 feet tall and loaded with fruit. You can see things like my Sun Gold tomatoes loaded up with fruit. In fact, these Sun Orange varieties right here, I'm already starting to get some ripe fruit. Just look at that. Isn't that incredible? I will be able to pick them probably in about 24 hours. And no matter where you look, we have cherry tomatoes that are in the ripening process. That is just looking fantastic back there. We have this Ceylon variety starting to ripen. If you look back here, we're starting to see some red shoulders in the rear there. We will be able to pick that tomato any day now. We could probably pick that now. The plum tomatoes are setting fruit. The beefsteaks are already starting to get large. I mean, look at these things. Beefsteak tomatoes already forming in nice big clusters. You can't beat it. And the effects are not just limited to the tomatoes. You can see the figs are already setting immense numbers of fruit. There's some big boys right there. But we have loads of cucumbers forming already. In fact, I've already picked a dozen cucumbers off of these vines. Everything is doing so well. They're just piling up everywhere. So at this time of the year, when things are inconsistently warm and it still gets pretty cool at night and occasionally during the day, the black fabric weed barrier is your friend. The plants love the additional heat. But you may be saying, well, what happens later in the summer when it's always hot during the day and night? Won't it make things too warm for you and work against you? Well, the good news is for the plants out in your garden, you can simply mulch over the black weed fabric, and then that will basically cancel out the effects of that weed fabric because you'll have the mulch that will reflect the sunlight instead of the black fabric that will absorb it. So you can use mulch to your advantage, and that brings me to tip number 2. Tip number 2 is to avoid mulching your plants too early during the year. Now, if you watch my channel, you know that I am constantly singing the praises of mulch, and I consider mulching your plants absolutely mandatory because it helps lock in that moisture and prevent evaporation. It suppresses weeds, and as it decays, it adds organic matter back to the soil. But there is a case when mulching can work against you. And that case is for heat-loving plants early in the season. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I showed you how I plant my watermelon vines, and I will eventually mulch them, but in this case, because the vines went in early May, when it was still dropping into the 50s during the night, and it wouldn't always warm up consistently during the day, well, watermelons are heat-loving plants. So had I placed the mulch on my raised bed, as soon as I planted these, well, the soil would be artificially cool, because this black soil, as it is right now, black attracts and absorbs heat. So leaving it unmulched during this time of the year, having that black soil top showing, will actually absorb more warmth. Now that we're in the back half of May, things are warming up nicely and it is starting to get hot. So in about another week or so, I will mulch these plants because at that point they will benefit from the cooler soil, but it is very important to understand that in the early part of the season, if your climate is not warm and it's getting cooler than the plants like, you may not want to mulch right away because it will cool your soil and slow them down. You want to add the mulch when you have issues with hot weather and it leads to excessive irrigation, the soil drying out, heat stress, etc. That is when you want to add mulch. You don't necessarily want to place it on day one. Now, obviously, if you live in a climate that is always hot, you would probably always want to mulch your plants. But if you live in a temperate zone and you deal with cool springs, mulch can be the enemy early in the season, so keep that in mind. Tip number 3 is to fertilize your new plants well, but make sure you are using the proper fertilizers for the time of year. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you've ever watched any of my planting videos, you will know that I always plant all of my plants alongside an organic granular fertilizer. But the things that you must understand about these types of fertilizers is that these are not fertilizers in their raw form. but rather precursors to fertilizer. In order for them to turn into usable fertilizer for the plants, they have to be worked into the soil, they have to be decomposed by the biology in the soil, and that is what releases the usable nutrients for the plants. So the day that you place these fertilizers along the plants, they're not really doing anything. They take weeks or longer to break down. Now the issue is that the soil biology becomes active above a certain temperature. So if you apply these fertilizers when the soil temps are in the 50s or in the low 60s, the biology may be so slow that it is not effectively breaking down these fertilizers at a fast enough rate for them to be usable. So if these are the only types of fertilizers that you use when you plant the plants and it's still really cool out, especially at night, and your soil has not yet come up to temp, basically it would be like planting them with no fertilizer at all. Now look, I am not saying don't use these fertilizers. You always want to use these fertilizers at transplanting and then top dress your plants every couple of weeks throughout the growing season. I'm simply highlighting their limitations, that early in the year when the soil is cool and the temperatures are cool, the breakdown rate of these fertilizers may not be fast enough for your plants. So at that time of year, you want to make sure that you supplement them with a fertilizer that is immediately bioavailable, something that has already been processed either by man or by nature naturally, so the plants could use them right away if the soil hasn't come to temp yet. So early in the year, when the soil is too consistently cool to efficiently break down those organic granular fertilizers, you can supplement the plantings with these water-soluble fertilizers. These are organic, things like Alaska Fish Emulsion 511. It's very high in nitrogen, but in the beginning of the year when nothing is flowering or blooming, it's generally okay to use as an organic water-soluble fertilizer. You could also use something like this Dr. Earth's Pump and Grow. It is also organic. It is a 322 NPK, so it's more balanced. These things, when you add them to a watering can as directed and you pour it on the soil, the nutrients have already been broken down naturally via fermentation. So when you drop that around the roots of the plants can immediately uptake and use the nutrients even if the soil is too cool to process them, because they've already been processed. And of course, there are a ton of different non-organic options for fertilizers that have already been processed, that are water soluble, that you just take a scooper and add to your watering can. My favorite one of the non-organic synthesized fertilizers is Jack's 20-20-20. Yes, this is J.R. Peters' Professional 20-20-20, but they are the parent company of Jack's. It's basically the same thing. This is really high quality stuff. If you're okay with using non-organic fertilizers, you just add 1 tablespoon per gallon into the watering can, pour it along the roots, and your plants can use that nutrition immediately. And of course, if you want something that you can pick up at any big box store, you could always pick up a box of Miracle Grow. This is very similar to the Jack's 20-20-20, although I think that the Jack's is a higher quality product. However, this will work in a pinch, especially early in the season if your soil is too cool. Now, you may not know it, but Miracle Grow also has a line of organic water-soluble fertilizers that work the same way. They are just made out of organic materials. And believe it or not, I got these for $1 a box at a big box store during fall clearance. So every now and again, you can get a really good cheap deal on organic water-soluble fertilizers. And tip number 4 is for all of my brothers and sisters in short season climates that have cool summers. I rarely get to talk to you this time of year because here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina, it is just so darn hot all summer long. In fact, just look behind me. We're about to get whacked by a classic summer thunderstorm already. But I'm excited to say that I do have some advice for you guys who live in short season or cool summer climates, because this is what I do to get ahead in my winter, and that is to use milk jug or water jug greenhouses. What I do is, if you buy gallons of milk or gallons of water, after you use them, you just cut the bottoms out and you leave the top cap open, and then you place them over your small plants. And this is a great free greenhouse hack in order to increase the concentration of warmth during the day over your smaller seedlings. Now obviously this isn't going to work if you have very large plants, but if you already have very large plants, you're probably not having a problem getting things growing. It's the small seedlings that are struggling to get off that are really the problem. So all you do is you simply dig out a small area around the plant, you place the milk jug greenhouses over them, and then you just place mulch or soil to lock them into place, or you could put a little stake through the top in order to hold them in place. and that will create a greenhouse effect and give you tremendously more warmth during the day. Now, it is very important that you leave that cap off to vent them. Otherwise, even if it's a pretty chilly day where it's only 55, 60 degrees, with the strength of the sun during this time of year, it can heat things up tremendously. So even if you don't think it's cool outside, underneath this milk jug greenhouse, you can cook your plants. However, it is very effective. So if you have yourself a little transplant like this, the milk jug greenhouse trick can get things growing in no time, and before you know it, you will have a plant that doubles or triples its size, way faster than if you just let them out in the open and you leave things up to the elements. Now, like I said, I've been using this milk jug greenhouse trick to grow things faster in my garden in winter and early spring for years with great success. And if you want to know all of the details, I will link to that video both above and down below in the video description. That will give you a full tutorial on how I do it. Here comes the thunder. It's summertime here. And that right there are 4 easy ways to dramatically increase the rate of growth of the plants in your garden. So if you think it's going to take forever for your plants to actually grow to maturity and get a harvest, never fear. So employ these tips and I guarantee you, you will see a significant increase in their rate of growth. And if you combine these things, they add up, they multiply. So you will get better results faster than you ever thought possible. So everybody, I sure hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and please ring that notification bell so you're notified when I release more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the products that I featured in this video, they are all linked down below in the video description for your convenience, and for everything I use in real life, I have them all linked down in my Amazon storefront link. So expand the video description, click on the Amazon link, you'll see everything I use in real life, and while you're down there, check out my spread shop for custom merch if you want to support the channel. I'm about to get hit by a thunderstorm, so thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video. And if you have any questions, please ask them down in the comments below.
Oh, Dale is so excited for his new toy. It's a dragon toy. Come on, we gotta. Oh, what are you doing? We gotta go outside. All right, buddy. Let's see if this dragon can fly. And go, Dale. Oh, there he goes. Oh, he's fired up today. There he goes. Go, Dale, go. Oh, I think he likes his new toy. Burn off those calories, buddy.